Hi, Year 12. I just wanted to give you a bit of feedback about the 20-mark question that you handed in this week. Most of you were absolutely fine with the broad kind of structure of your answers, addressing both human and natural factors within your responses, building a nice argument throughout and making it clear whether you thought human or natural factors were more important. Everybody had a conclusion in there and things. So lots and lots of stuff being done really, really well. Just a couple of bits I wanted to pull out, though, was about people's use of examples and exemplification to support their points. And also about how we need to try and be a little bit more sophisticated in some of our points in terms of considering short and long-term timescales, or maybe in a different question, thinking about kind of local versus global differences. That's not really relevant to this question, but certainly the element of timescale was important. Just starting with the introduction, I've just pulled out one person's answer, and we're just going to look at three different parts of it, just to talk about some of the mistakes that people made, really with a view to you thinking about next time you come to do a 20-mark answer, that you're trying to make sure that you're not making those same mistakes again. Firstly, with your intros, a couple of bits you want to make sure you do in your introduction. Firstly, is defining any key terms. So within this answer, river discharge is obviously a key bit of terminology, as are human and natural factors. So we can see in this answer, this student starts by defining what river discharge is, the volume of water in a river channel, saying that it's measured in cumecs. Good use of vocabulary and key bits of terminology there. Mentions what some of the human and physical factors are. Doesn't go into any more detail about them, but does mention them. And then goes on to state their argument as well. So they've said here, it can be argued that, on the whole, factors which have the largest importance are human factors. And then the rest of the answer goes on to explain why. It is really important that you know what you think before you start writing the answer, and that you state that viewpoint at the start, and then you stick to that and you elaborate on that throughout your response. Just picked out one paragraph here where the student deals with a human factor affecting discharge, which is deforestation. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. What you could do now actually is pause the video and just have a read of this paragraph. And then we're going to talk about why this paragraph ticks quite a lot of boxes. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to read it now. Three things that this paragraph does really well. One of those is gives really nice, clear explanation of processes. So in this part of the answer here, talking about the removal of forest cover, talking about interception and infiltration, surface runoff, loss of tree roots binding the soil together. Some nice, clear explanation about how that factor of deforestation, how that influences discharge. So we've got some explanation. We've also then got some exemplification as well. So they haven't just left it at that point. Many of you gave some nice explanations about how a particular factor affects the discharge of a river, but you didn't then back that up with any support. You didn't mention either the Amazon or the River X or any of the other little examples that we've looked at, or even just name dropping a type of impermeable rock, for example. You need to make sure that if you're making a point, you're supporting it with explanation and with evidence as well. Okay. The other thing that this answer does, which you may well have picked up on when you've been reading it, is it deals with the idea of short-term and long-term responses. So it talks here about, in the short term, how the loss of vegetation leads to increased surface runoff, leading to greater river discharge. Okay. But what it then goes on to do is think about, actually, that's not always the case. And in the longer term, actually, it can have the opposite effect and actually leads to reduced river discharge and decreased precipitation. So as well as this exemplification that they've got here, and this student actually went away and researched this example themselves, which was brilliant. You don't always have to do that, though. We have covered lots of examples within our lessons that you can refer to. You've just got to make sure that you're doing that. As a bit of a structure, maybe think about the idea of a kind of an acronym, the idea of PEAL to structure your paragraphs, making a point that deforestation is important, explaining, how does deforestation affect river discharge, giving some examples or some evidence, okay? And then the L is to link back to the question. The students done that at the end of their answer here. They've said they've talked about urbanisation before. Both urbanisation and deforestation demonstrate the significant impacts that human factors can have on river discharge. So that's their link at that point there. Final thing then is in your conclusions. Like I said, everybody had a conclusion, but your conclusion needs to be really in sort of two parts. First bit that it needs to be a bit of a summary, really, of your overall answer. It should summarise in a few sentences the main points that you've made, and it should also sum up your argument and really ram home that idea that you're trying to present. So again, maybe just pause the video and just have a quick read of this conclusion. Okay, so we can see how the students kind of interwoven the idea of the summary of their argument. It can be argued that human factors have the most importance. They've then gone on to state that again, argue that on the whole, human factors are more important than natural factors. And then in between that, this is where they've kind of given that little summary at that point of really what the rest of their answer was talking about. So hopefully that's some pointers for the next time you come to write one of these 20 markers. As I say, as a first effort, I was really, really impressed actually in terms of the way people had structured them. Nice to see that people had handed some plans in with their answers as well. So well done.